afternoon. Thank you. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. My name is Vajanti Desai, and I'm the Program Manager of Identification Development, an initiative that cuts across many different parts of the World Bank Group and which supports countries to harness the transformational potential of identification systems while ensuring they meet the critical goals of inclusion, data protection, and trust. To dive into these issues, we have designed an excellent event for you today. It begins with a stellar panel of country and global leaders, followed by remarks from two powerful advocates of identification for the most vulnerable. The second half will be pitches of the finalists of the Mission Billion Innovation Challenge, some very innovative ideas to strengthen trust and data protection in digital ID systems, and the awarding of the winners. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank everyone in our ID4D community who have been critical to advancing this agenda. Sorry, I've been running around. First, our high-level advisory council of thought leaders across the globe, co-chaired by Kristalina Georgieva, our CEO, and Amina Mohammed, the UN Deputy Secretary General. Internally, our extremely supportive vice presidents, the cross-sectoral department, a group of directors, and the teams across the global practices, many of whom who are working in the field. And our donors, who are most importantly our thought partners, the Gates Foundation, Omidyar Network, and the Australian government, together with many others who we work with, some of in this room. We couldn't be at this place without all of you. Without further delay, let me introduce Raj Kumar, founding president and editor-in-chief of DevX and author of the new book, The Business of the Changing World, who will be moderating the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Raj Kumar. I'm going to ask our panelists to just join me up on stage. Come right in, find your spot. And as they're doing that, I just want to say you can feel by the attendance at this event, the kind of standing room only nature of this event, for those of you joining online and can't see it, the momentum around this issue. Digital IDs is an issue that has arrived. And you can see it across the development sector. There's so many cross-cutting issues that connect to this one. I was thinking about it as I came in through that long security line that probably many of you suffered through, that imagine losing your cell phone or your wallet in that line and having to rush back to get it. It's happened probably to all of us, and that feeling of anxiety, that tapping all your pockets feeling, it happens because we know the value of having your cell phone or having your ID. We understand what it means to not have the basic tools you use to live your life every day, to make the purchases you have to make, to get health care, to enroll your kids in school. All the kind of basics of life, right, are tied up in that ID. But if you looked around this room, I think we could just sort of imagine maybe from here that way, people without IDs. If that many people, if this were the world, it would be all those rows back there without IDs, right? That is the reality of the world today. My guess is every single person in the room here has an ID. Is that right? I think so.
Not me.
Almost everyone. And it gives you a sense, right, of the realities we live in, which is, I think, one reason why the development sector has taken a while to wake up to this issue. But we are here, and many cross-cutting themes have come together to bring us here. And again, that momentum, I think, is shown even by the level of panelists that we have today. So let me take you through a little bit about what's going to happen. We have a number of speakers and panelists and a really exciting session that's going to happen at the end. We're joined right now by Her Majesty Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, who is here in the front row and is the UN Secretary General's special advocate for inclusive finance for development, someone who's been working on these issues for many years. We're excited to hear from you in a little while. Kristalina Georgieva, who's of course the CEO of the World Bank, will be joining us shortly. After we hear from all of our speakers, we're going to have a pitch session. You're all going to get to be part of this very audience participatory session where we hear from people who are designing some of the solutions to the problems we're about to describe. So that's going to be exciting, including for those of you joining online and in the room, you will all pick the winner for one of these awards. There is a People's Choice Award that will be given out live in real time here. So pay attention. If you have your cell phone out, that's great, as long as you're using it to tweet. And the hashtags are ID4D and Mission Billion, which is the name of the challenge you're going to hear a little bit more about in a moment. So let's break into the discussion. Let me tell you who all is sitting next to me. We have the Prime Minister of Somalia, His Excellency Hassan Ali Kaire. We have the UNHCR Commissioner Filippo Grandi. We have the Minister of ICT and Innovation of Rwanda, Her Excellency Paula Ingabire. And we have the Minister of Planning for Côte d'Ivoire, Her Excellency Niale Kaba. So thank you all for being a part of this discussion today. I want to kick it off with the Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, give us a sense. Don't give us just one reason. It's a big enough issue. Give us 2 reasons.
Yeah.
And I'll ask all of you. 2 reasons why it is essential that digital IDs are at the top of your agenda in your country.
Can we have a look at your ID first?
No.
To make sure that we have the right moderator. No, I said it, I don't have ID because I just wanted to bring into the attention of the people on this audience that where Somalia is. We are undertaking major reforms in our country. We are very pleased and grateful with the work we're doing with IMF and World Bank, and we're very close to having a process of debt relief. That will enable our economy to grow. We'll have access to the national financial institutions. But in order for our banks to function, we need to have the issue of KYC resolved. And to do that, you need an ID card.
Yep.
And that is what we are trying to work with the World Bank on.
And KYC, for those joining online, know your customer, very basic element of banking regulation.
And without that ID card system, you can solve that problem. The second element is that we are undertaking a political reform process where we are rewriting our constitution. That will also give us an opportunity for our country to give our ordinary citizens to get power back from the politicians, meaning that we are rooting for one person, one vote. And for us to conduct an election system in our country, you will need an ID card. 3, we're doing security sector reform. And to do a security sector reform in our country, to register every soldier, and you need to pay them biometrically, you need to have secure, reliable ID card system that works. And finally, with ID card system that works, it will help grow our economy, help us reform our security structures, and lead our country to a one-person, one-vote election. And on top of that, we will know every individual in the country and every citizen. And that will help the security team on the ground to improve the security of the country. And finally, it is the best way to eliminate or reduce corruption. So, the solution, or whoever is going to win the award, I will want to hear today, the person who will design ID cards for Somalia. That's why I joined this panel.
That is a good call to action. And as you can tell, please applaud the Prime Minister. As you can tell, the ID card is pretty fundamental to the nation state, right? You're talking about elections, you're talking about security, you're talking about providing basic services. Filippo, I wonder if we can go to you as the commissioner at UNHCR. You don't represent a nation state, you represent an institution, a UN agency. You're thinking about refugees. Where does digital ID connect for you?
I represent quite a large number of people too, in a different way, almost 70 million people.
Yeah.
But I want to, I ask people who have heard this story from me to bear with me for a second, but I want to tell you a story that I often use. And this relates to when I started this job 3 years ago. I was in Greece. At that time, people were still streaming in from Syria into Europe through Greece. And I went on the Greek islands. I met a Syrian family who was just disembarking from one of those boats. And I asked them, were you know, it must have been a terrible experience to escape from the bombs and the war. They said, yeah, it was terrible. I said, when were you most worried and most afraid in all this ordeal that you went through? Was it when you were in Syria under the bombs? They said it wasn't the most scary moment. Was it when you crossed the border into Turkey? There were smugglers trying to take advantage of you. They said, no, it wasn't that moment. I said, was it when you boarded the boat and, you know, you cannot swim? It was. I said, when was the most scary moment? And they said, it was when the boat was in the middle of the sea and our phone didn't have a signal. So I think that this is a very, you know, this is a true story. And it shows the importance of connectivity in today's world. And it shows how important connectivity, which is not possible without digital identity, that's the conclusion of this story. It shows how connectivity and digital identity are particularly important for the people that my organization cares for, the refugees. I mean, the Prime Minister knows this by personal experience and can tell you more about that. You know, identity, legal identity, for refugees, documents often have been stolen or have been lost in the chaos of flight. Many times they've never received documents. You know, we deal with 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, from Burma, from Myanmar, that when they received our modest ration card, that was the first identity document they had ever received in their life, because they've been so discriminated in their own country. And but many times the documents were taken away, and many times as refugees they're not allowed to have documents. So for us, the concept of digital identity for a population in movement, in coordination with governments, with states, is extremely vital, and that's why I'm here.
And you emphasize something that I think is very important. I want to bring Paula, Minister Ngabire, into this. You're talking about the digital nature of the ID card, right? People have that ration card, or they have an old-fashioned ID card of some kind. But really, the initiative that the World Bank is leading and that we're here to talk about is really integrating those two concepts, ID and digital. Talk to us how you're doing that in Rwanda, because Rwanda is one of the leaders when it comes to digital everything, right? The government is really setting out social services, public services, and using digital as the underlying technology for everything. Why is ID critical to that?
So I think the Prime Minister did a good job at really summarizing the key aspects from a government point of view why digital ID is really essential. And for us, some of those reasons are relevant to us, and really we can relate with them. And one of them was coming out of conflict and thinking about how to be inclusive in terms of how we provide services to our citizens. Then the ID was a critical component and aspect of how we identify people, but also how we make sure that everyone is getting the services that we provide as a government, but also as the private sector. The other element is that we needed to ensure that people can move freely across the region. And so that becomes another essential component. How do you enable free movement of people across the region in a secure manner, so where they are? There
was a video that was played, I think, before we came on stage, which showed a merchant traveling from Uganda to Kenya, a trader, and that's a pretty standard problem for people who live in border regions, right?
Absolutely. And then the other thing is, as we design some of the social protection programs for our citizens, the ID, not even just the digital, because what we have currently is a 2D barcode type of ID. But it was essential for how we design some of these social protection programs and who we design them for and how we identify them, so that we have more targeted interventions towards our citizens. And the last bit, of course, which is very crucial, is security. Security from a user perspective, from a citizen perspective, but also from the government perspective, to make sure you're safeguarding some of the kind of demographic data that we're getting, and you don't have examples of people cloning other people's identities in terms of getting services. And so that has been our journey, where we had to put in place an ID system that also looked at a broad range of categories within the society. We looked at, so today, someone who's 16 years and above is eligible for an ID. But we also create an option for people who are under 16. We have an option of IDs for refugees and foreigners, so that you make sure that it's inclusive and not just targeting a specific aspect of the citizens or the population within the economy.
Yeah, especially because there's so many marginalized groups. I think if you look at the percentage of people who don't have an ID, it's children, it's women, where the percentages are much, much higher. You started to hint a little bit at some of the potential challenges around digital ID. We're going to get back to those, but I first want to bring in Minister Kaba into the discussion to tell us a bit more about why this is a priority area for your government in Côte d'Ivoire.
Thank you very much. Indeed, Côte d'Ivoire, as you know, is a country of 25 million people, with 26% of West African citizens living in our country, and perhaps half, or perhaps even less, fewer people than half have an official ID card. So this is a major challenge. We're coming out of a crisis also, and I think that the identity issue was one of the problems linked to the crisis. So starting in 2015, 2015, we felt that it was important to have real identity. That's a security issue because of the movements of population in the region, and that's a security issue on the national level because since ID cards were fragile, for instance, when you work or you go to school, you're given an ID card, but they're not really, they don't really confirm the identity of the citizens. So that was a problem for, and then there's the issue of rights. If you don't have ID cards, you can't go to a bank, or you can't go to a hospital, and you can go to school only up to a certain age. So the government felt that it was important to put order in all of that, to settle this issue, to allow all the inhabitants of our country, whether they be foreigners or national, to have an official identity, to be able to settle this issue and to give the rights to the citizens.
Thank you very much for that. And I mean, you think about the starkness of that message, that half of a country not having an identification, and as you say, fragile IDs, that maybe you do have something like a ration card or a student ID or something that isn't really sustainable for your life, that might fall apart, that might get lost. So the beauty of digital ID in a way is that it is something that is persistent throughout your life, and it can't be changed. Yeah. But the dangers that connects to are what I want to bring in now with the Prime Minister. You talked about lots of reasons why digital ID matters and is important. I think what's shifted in the discussion a lot around this is, yes, we need IDs. Yes, they're happening. More and more people are getting them. But there's risks if we don't do it right. What are some of those issues when you think about the challenge in your own country around privacy, data security, ownership of ID that you're trying to address as you roll this out? And what do you want from people in this room who work on these issues, the donor community, to support your government in this area?
Right now where we are is in a stage where our country has a great potential in economic growth, in political stability, in security sector reform, and is a nation with a lot of resources, provided that it is well managed. Just to re-emphasize, therefore, the importance first of the ID, where my country has reached in terms of reforms, we cannot move from here unless we solve the ID issue. To put it in perspective, for us as a country, it actually means we cannot develop our economy or make our central bank function or our security sector function, or we can not hold elections in our country, or our students and universities will not be able to take part of the development of the nation. In other words, where my country today is, unless we have an ID system that every citizen has access to, then every effort we've been making in every other reform stops. So that's just in perspective. Second element is the question you've talked about is the risk. There's always downside to technology, but that is why we have to always keep trying to improve. There must be a strengthened capacity in the government who owns the system. We need to make sure that countries see this in line with how you deal with corruption, so that doesn't bring a problem. There must be a security managed structure so that you know how this is done. And then proper investment and future investment is made in line with the other reforms that you're making as a nation. So for us, where we are, how do you fix the problem? And how do you prevent future problems in terms of the risk that comes with? But mitigation of risk is part of the planning of the initial phase in terms of putting the mechanisms in place. And that's where we are hoping to see. The advantage with our country is that is maybe where a completely newly designed system could be tested. Right. And then other countries can take advantage of.
And I think that's why you have the 4D in the name ID for D. You know, you can do ID, you can have everybody get identification without a development lens, but included in that development lens is protecting their rights, right? And I'm sure at UNHCR you're probably sitting on, de facto, lots of identification of refugees around the world. You see many who didn't have an ID before. There are many programs now, I talk to officials at UN agencies all the time who say because of the programs they run, they have to ID people. And so there are IDs held by lots of institutions, including NGOs and UN agencies. It's kind of a brave new world in a way. It's not just governments that hold people's IDs. So how do you think about that and the risks associated with doing this in a way that's responsible, that protects people's human rights?
Yeah, risks and maybe opportunities too. No, I think what you said earlier, Raj, is very important, that in a way, digital ID offers to people whose ID is threatened or lost, like refugees, more protection than traditional ID. You know, everybody who has worked with refugees knows how much they cling to that little documentation that they have. They carry it in pouches on their body because they know how important it is. And digital ID, in a way, protects you from that. And for people on the move and under threat, this is vital. Just a couple of quick things. One is why it is important for refugees. And I realize that refugees, in a way, are a small group. Here we're talking about countries with big population, but refugees are emblematic also of so many people deprived of IDs. And I think that one thing that we also need to learn is when we think of refugees, we think of camps, closed places, dependent on aid, with traditional ID and rations. Now, most of the refugees in the world live in communities. You know, when you think of Jordan, you think of this famous Zatari camp, but in reality, this is only 10% of the refugees in Jordan. They live in cities. So in order to have access to services, to jobs, they need ID. They need also ID that are recognized by the country where they're hosted, and they will need ID when they go back home. And then you need to make sure that that ID is compatible with the service, allows them to reintegrate the society where they go back to. So there's quite a lot of challenges there because we navigate between different systems. Two more things. One, in refugee and humanitarian setting, ID is also indispensable to allow people to have efficient access to support, to aid. Most of the aid today is not anymore bags or blank, is cash. And cash is accessed with ATM systems, and you need IDs to do that efficiently. And also, that's a very powerful system to counter fraud and abuse, to ensure the integrity of aid systems. The other thing, somehow at the other end of the spectrum, is that, of course, digital ID raises significant issues of privacy and data protection, especially for people like refugees who are often, who often flee countries in contrast with their governments, or maybe even persecuted by their governments. Let's call a spade a spade. So having a digital ID is fantastic, but can also expose you to human rights abuses, to retaliation. And the digital world doesn't stop at borders, so it can go beyond. So that's why we at UNHCR, those of you who have worked with us know that we are very particular on that. I'm looking at Her Majesty because she knows. We know all the fantastic advantages of digital ID. We need to exercise the utmost caution when we embark on these projects, to ensure that it doesn't expose unduly refugees to threats. Much as states love digital ID because it allows them to count, to control, and that is all good. So we need to chart a middle way between control and privacy and defense of human rights.
And these are really open questions. Maybe some of the biggest questions in the world today remain unresolved. How exactly will we find a way to have a system that's interoperable but yet protects the individual's rights and gives them unique and personal ownership over their data? These are open questions that I think we may hear a bit more about as we get to our pitches in a moment. We've kind of run out of time, but if there are any final thoughts from the ministers, I would love to give you one quick chance if you have a final thought on some of the points that have been raised.
I think in response, and I'll probably pick it up from what you just said, some of the open questions that could be out there, and these can be responded through where we are very deliberate about creating citizen-centric digital IDs and also doing privacy by design when we design some of these digital ID platforms. And that's the case for Rwanda, because as we move from the first generation of IDs and start to think about the next generation, what has happened is that, and that's, by the way, one of the reasons we as a country were interested in Mission Billion, because we're already thinking of how do we create a digital ID platform that is replicable across the continent, because today as a continent we're talking about a single digital market, we're talking about trade and economic integration, we're talking about a cashless society. So it's important that as we build our individual digital ID platforms, at the end of the day they're interoperable. And so whoever gets their foot in the door first should be able to design a system that can become a model for the rest of the continent, and we can plug into that. The other thing, and I want to sort of conclude on that, is as we talk about privacy and really being very citizen-centric, is we should start thinking about privacy and data protection laws, something that we've already done as a country as we start to think about, rolling out services to citizens and this whole digital ID agenda. The other element is advanced identification capabilities and data sharing capabilities, which should have user consent, and creating a dashboard where citizens are able to view and verify some of the consents to people that are accessing their data. I think
and real user consent, right?
Real user consent.
There's so much user consent today. We've all clicked on those, I consent.
No, real user consent. And even have the ability to revoke some of these things if you feel like something doesn't sound right. And then, of course, awareness is very critical, because if you're talking about a continent where even basic literacy is still low, and we're talking about transitioning into a digital economy, how much awareness are we creating for our citizens and our population to understand that privacy starts with them before we even talk about the service providers and everyone else? So this is really what we need to be doing as we think about the broader picture of the digital ID platform.
Really important points that I think we're going to pick up a little bit on in the pitches. Any final thoughts from you, Minister Kaba, maybe in particular on universal access? How are you going to make sure this really, the new ID system you roll out, really reaches every citizen of Côte d'Ivoire?
Effectivement, donc, je l'ai dit tantôt, nos défis sont grands.
Well, indeed, all our challenges are huge. It is important that we can implement measures that reassure the architecture that is being built is that there's a digital platform to start with. We reinforce the initial information of those who have ID already, secure identity, and then that we can capture in all those who don't have ID through different points of entry. We talked about different social services, but do that at a minimal cost. And also maybe reassure them about the protection of the personal information. There's a representation that's been in place since 2013 for multiple identities. For all the information that's self-generated by individuals, we might have to revisit that to make sure it's adapted. There's also a major challenge for the registry of citizens. The interpreter apologizes. We have a lot of sound issues. It's difficult to hear the minister. We need to try and find a mechanism of automatic updating of the platform with birth registries. All this is being built. We are fairly advanced, and we believe that it will be implemented soon, because we have the challenge of new ID that will be implemented latest in 2019. So that's what I wanted to say. It is a challenge which is huge. It's national for each of the countries, but also it's a sub-regional challenge in terms of exchange as well as security. Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre. C'est un grand défi, en particulier dans les régions où les défis sont énormes. La question, c'est combien de temps est-ce que ça...
Will we do it in the right way? I wanted to ask Her Majesty to join the conversation, if she might join us at the podium. Her Majesty Queen Maxima of the Netherlands and the UN Secretary General, Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development. We would love to hear your thoughts. Please.
Your Excellencies, Madam, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here today and happy to hear this very rich conversation on the importance on digital IDs. I mean, we just heard from you mobility, so therefore regionalization. We heard the term security. We heard dignity, self-assurance. We heard connectivity. We heard allow access to rights. And I would like to focus on two things that are actually very dear to my heart and work that I've been doing for more than 10 years, which is the use of digital IDs for financial and economic inclusion. A unique biometric digital identification can be a huge enabler for financial inclusion. And it can do this in two ways. First and foremost, digital ID systems allow KYC compliance for account openings. So we were just mentioning that. But it does help the 20% of financially excluded adults in low and middle-income countries who are unable to access financial systems because they lack the required documents to prove their identity. Digital identification also supports ongoing AML CFT monitoring. It better identifies, for example, who people are, from where a transaction is conducted, and which funds are being used, all to ensure more robust financial integrity. Something is very important. Second, digital IDs allows the identification of recipients for G2P subsidies and enable beneficiaries to receive digital payments in a much easier way. This can reduce fraud in social programs, reduce costs, and finally give support to the people that really need it and not to middlemen that actually might keep a little part. The government of India, for instance, has saved more than $9 billion from fraud elimination in its beneficiary list across multiple programs after they actually applied the unique ID. However, opportunities surrounding digital ID systems are, of course, accompanied by privacy risks. Security breaches, such as cyber attacks on databases or during data transfers, as well as facilitating surveillance on people, are threats that must be considered. The consequences of privacy violations are really serious. It could lead to discrimination, prosecution, unjust treatment, and more. And public trust in digital financial services can erode without strong data privacy. And as you know, in financial services, trust is about everything. Inaccurate or biased information might result in a person's loan application being rejected erroneously or improperly. Or the selling of personal information to third-party data brokers can turn a person into a target of abusive marketing practices. And this also deters trust. There are numerous strategies that can be utilized to mitigate these risks and still reap the benefits of digital identification for financial inclusion. As Minister Ingabire just mentioned, our privacy by design approach builds privacy as the default setting in digital ID systems. This method brings together legal, organizational, and technological controls. Importantly, a successful privacy by design approach requires an array of considerations. When handling personal data, both the public and private sector can encrypt it, anonymize it, very difficult word, use pseudonyms and tokens. And these tactics help to, first of all, limit the processing of personal data to the minimum necessary. Secondly, hide personal data and the interrelationships of the data points from plain view, so an individual's data points are not linked nor easily observed. Third, separate and distribute the processing of personal data to avoid the ability to make complete profiles of individuals. And fourthly, aggregate personal data when processing at the group level to limit privacy risks to a specific individual. Companies and government can also provide more control to individuals. They can ensure that individuals are informed about when and why their data is processed. Additionally, people should be provided the tools to control the processing of the data, along with the ability to correct it and challenge inaccuracies, also something very important. If well-designed, digital ID systems have the potential to be more secure and privacy-centric than traditional paper-based alternatives. Encryption, consent, and control can improve security and transparency. It enables people to understand how and when their data is used by a third party. And they can also be notified in the event of a data breach. Digital identification is also capable of protecting personal information via machine-readable credentials, such as smart cards and QR codes, so that only the pieces of necessary personal information are being shared, something very important. And we always repeat, nice to know to need to know, right? Governments considering creating digital foundation ID systems could learn from the experience of other economies which have taken a privacy by design approach. Peru and the EU are two good examples to look into. And of course, establishing international and open standards as well as global principles will be essential to help countries further in the design and implementation of their own digital ID systems. Now, I know Kristalina is eager to offer her closing reflections as well. So I would like to conclude by saying how important it is that we discuss these issues and that we really help each other so that we can harness the potential of having digital identities while we do empower citizens to use them to their own benefits and avoid abuses. I wish you much success, and the World Bank in doing so is one of the public goods, I always say, that my work relies upon, and I really need your success. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Queen Maxima. A very clear roadmap that I think can really take this conversation forward. And I do want to ask Kristalina Georgieva, who has just completed 3 months as the interim president of the World Bank, so really needs no introduction here, but is, of course, Kristalina is also the CEO of the World Bank. She's gone back to this very light duty of just being the CEO of the World Bank and is the co-chair of the ID4D High-Level Advisory Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Majesty, distinguished panelists. It was Monday midnight when I passed to David Malpass, great president, the baton of running this World Bank group, and then I have chosen not to turn into a pumpkin, but just to come back to being the CEO of the World Bank. And that is a great job, and I am incredibly fortunate to have it. And I want to start from a reflection I had on my way to this room. And it is reflection on how many ways I have to prove who I am. I have my birth certificate. I have my marriage certificate. I have my 3 diplomas, high school, university, PhD. I have my national ID. I have my national passport. I have my driver's license. And I have a way to say I work for the World Bank. And I think of the billion people who have none of those. They cannot prove that they even exist. They have no easy access to services, to education, to travel, to finance. And then there are many more who have ways in which they can try to show who they are, but may not be broadly acceptable. And the devastation for their families, for their communities, for their countries, from not having that proof of identity is one that we are discussing here today. So here I am. I have too many. My problem is, how do I make sure I don't lose them? But these people don't have that kind of a problem. They have a real problem, and it is our duty to make sure that this problem is wiped out. And of course, the way we want to approach it is also recognizing that lack of ID on top of everything else is sexist. 15% more women are missing a form of identification than men. So whether we are talking about financial inclusion or making sure that women and men equally can contribute to the economy, it all in the end boils down to solving this problem. I would say the following in this closing session. One, that we are now all moving into a digital world, and therefore we should be solving it with the means of today and tomorrow, not of yesterday. The future is digital, and it is a tough one to handle because all of the risks around data protection, but we have to wrestle with those problems and find ways to solve them. Two, it is a solvable problem. We actually put a price tag on it. We at the World Bank love numbers. It's a big price tag, but it is not out of reality. We put a $9 billion globally to strengthen digital ID and birth registration. $6 billion, two-thirds, has to be for Africa, where we are further behind than any other region. We are very clear that by doing so, we are providing a gateway to economic inclusion, to financial inclusion, to access to services, and first and foremost, to dignity for all people. But we're also providing something else, and this something else is absolutely fair to put right in the middle of our discussion. We provide a way for people to own their data. In this digital world, data is actually asset. It is so valuable, and it belongs to people. But unless they have a way to control this data, it does not belong to them. So that is a very important fairness issue that we have to keep in mind. Finally, we have governments to act. Some of them are represented, and these are, I know these three people here on the podium, and actually I know all these five people on the podium, I should say. But I think that to those representing governments, we have to give a big round of applause. Big round of applause. They are dealing in tough environments with these questions. And Filippo Grandi is right there to help. The father of all displaced for no fault of their own. A great man. So, should we? We should. And then we have other institutions. We have the UN. We have Her Majesty, who is championing it. Yes. And then we have the staff of the bank. And we are determined to be, and we are already, a very major factor in moving this agenda forward. We made a commitment to Digital Africa. We are going to put $25 billion over the next years in making sure that Africa leapfrogs on digital and actually beats us, the old folk from Europe. We want to mobilize another $25 billion to private sector for digital, but big part of digital is digital ID. We already have $4.5 billion in digital investments. $1 billion out of it is for digital ID. We have here, while talking about mothers, fathers, and so forth, Butene is our director for digital. Here she is. And we think of this as one of the most exciting things we do at the World Bank. The digital agenda is a growth agenda. It is a youth agenda. And it is a peace and stability agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristalina. And you got us started on audience participation, which is what we're going to continue with right now. So can I ask both you and Your Majesty to join us on stage? We're going to take a photograph before the panelists are let go. And then we're going to have some more audience participation. So stay where you are. You guys can actually step to the right. Please. ID for D and Mission Billion.
Yes. I think we should do this.
All right.
Yes. Very good.
Thank you. Yes, please remain in your seats for a moment because we have more to come. You have heard allusions already to the Mission Billion Challenge, that you are about to witness it in action. We got a little bit into our discussions into some of the core issues around privacy and data protection, users owning their own data. We are now going to hear about some real solutions. And I've got a little bit of a clue into what you're going to hear about. And let me tell you, this is worth sticking around for. I also want you to know that you're going to hear from finalists who do not know who won this prize. So you will notice some excitement and anticipation on the stage in a moment. I want to ask Matthew Miner, who's the Director of International Programs at MIT Solve, to come up here and lead us in this next session. Matthew, all yours.
Great. Thank you, Raj. I don't know if this is on, so I will use the podium. Half the room cleared out. It's like someone important didn't leave. Well, I'm happy for those of you that are here and then that stuck around. You're going to see something very exciting, something very different that maybe you haven't anticipated or seen before. So as Raj alluded to, the Mission Billion Challenge was launched at the end of last year, and it asked the question, how can digital identification systems in developing countries be better designed or adapted to protect people's privacy and empower them with greater control over their personal data? So, for the challenge, we received more than 170 solutions submitted to MIT Solve's Open Innovation Platform from 56 different countries. An international panel of experts are all here on the front row, and they selected 6 of those more than 170 solutions to come here and pitch today. Those 6 have the most promising solutions, the experts believed, to addressing this challenge, and you will hear the pitches in a moment. Yesterday, each finalist spent about 45 minutes alone with the panel of judges. And the judges asked them some really hard questions. I was there. It got awkward at times. But overall, we had a great time, and the judges feel like they got a good understanding of the different solutions that had been submitted. So the running order of today, it's going to be pretty fast-paced. Each finalist will have 4 minutes to pitch. I'm going to keep time, and I will keep them to time. So I'm sorry if I have to interrupt any of the finalists over here, but please stay at around 4 minutes. At the end of the event, everyone in the room and everyone that's watching online will have the opportunity to vote for their favorite solution by visiting slido.com and entering the event code MBC2019, MBC 2019, and you will have the opportunity to vote then. Don't vote yet because you have not heard the finalists speak. Okay, so get ready for a dynamic 45 minutes. It's going to be pretty fast-paced, and I'd like to go ahead and welcome our first finalist to the Mission Billion Challenge, Tanuj Bajwani.
Is this working? Hey, now you can hear me. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tanuj Bhojwani. I work at a think tank called iSpirit back in India. We build digital infrastructure as public goods. Along with my teammate Satya, we're here to present Sthan, which basically means place in Hindi. So, number one question, what is an address? A structured address is a stroke of genius, and you can only understand its value if you live in a place that does not have it. So that is what an address is supposed to do. On the left, reach out to an individual household. But just next to that is what actually happens in developing nations. Everybody here has a story about how they have an address which is either behind a tree or next to a cow or something like that. A friend of mine I bumped into just before the event told me how electricity bills in Afghanistan are delivered to the mosque and dumped there, where people come in and then pick out their own electricity bill from there because they don't have a structured address that post or mailman can reach. Now, if you look at the components of a digital ID that we spoke about, name, the basic demographics, name, age, gender, and address, right? The other three tell you who you are, but address also, it doesn't simply say where you are. It also talks about who are you. This is one of many random maps on the internet which can tell you your income based on your zip code. It can also predict credit scores. It can predict your performance in schools, etc. So we don't treat address data as privately as we should. And just 2 weeks ago, your first case of swatting, which is where in America, a very weird prank where people call the police and armed response team to your house by looking up your address online in plain text, because internet companies collect it and don't keep it safely. Like was pointed out earlier, how do we reinvent ID in the age of digital? We're asking, how do you reinvent addresses in the age of digital? And to do that, you need to ask, what is an address used for? It's used for two simple things. One is to reach you, to get something to your doorstep or to reach your own doorstep. And to resolve, to know where you are in some sort of geographical context. So I live currently in the city of Bangalore, which is in the state of Karnataka, which is in the country India, right? So if you just need to do these two things with digital, why does the address look like what we saw in the previous slide? Sthan says that that address globally should be a standard which looks something like this. Right? There are two essential ideas. So the thing in the center, Anna at India Post, that could be your physical address, very similar to how you have an email address. And what we're saying is it has two important elements. Number one, it has a pluggable identity. It has somebody who claims ownership of that address. So we're putting humans back in the center of an address, right? So a pluggable identity, and then an address in the form that you're used to, either unstructured text or structured variables. Bangalore, your address, maybe a GPS so that you can call an Uber, right? But by putting the address this way, we can also start having interesting features like Her Excellency spoke about. You can start requiring that when the address is resolved, you only return the variable that is crucial to the context. If you want to know, if you ask me where I'm from, I'm going to say India or Bangalore. I'm not going to tell you I'm from, this is the door number, this is the street that I live on, right? So similarly, in an online context, when resolving your address, only that information that you want will be shared with your consent. Moreover, this is a self-determined address. You don't have to learn an addressing scheme. You can choose your own. It doesn't have to change when you move because it is centered around the human. So refugee problem or migration problems, they don't have to keep updating the addresses in 10 places. They simply change what the pointer points to. I already spoke about granular consented privacy preserving resolution, but you can also have profiles because user lives are complex. You have more than one addresses. You can have live addresses which are tracking your current location and share that as a stream, maybe with your Uber, maybe somewhere else. Digital ID programs such as Aadhaar, where I come from, or any other in any country, will not need any special effort to integrate this. Simply replace the address text with the Sthan address, and the resolution happens through a network of private providers. And if we win the challenge, this was one of the questions asked to us was, what will we do with this? We simply want to create an open protocol for the globe so that when you travel from one country to another, just like your email address doesn't change because you've changed boundaries, we want your physical address protocol, the way it is structured, to not change when you change boundaries. Me and Satya will help in creating an open source Sthan implementation and make it available to the world so that other private providers can build on top of that. Thank you.
House finally. Okay, so next up, we're going to have Toby Norman, as our second finalist pitching today. Welcome, Toby.
Great. So thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Toby Norman. I'm the CEO of Simprints. Our mission is to radically increase transparency and effectiveness in global development, using technology like biometrics to make sure that every vaccine, every dollar, every government service reaches its intended beneficiary. And over the past 4 years, we worked with organizations like the Ethiopian Ministry of Health, USAID, and DFID to deliver digital ID to hundreds of thousands of people. Today, I want to share 3 paradoxes that we've seen in the quest for better privacy and how our proposal for an open source toolkit can solve them. The first paradox is that detailed privacy notices can decrease rather than increase genuinely informed consent. Imagine you're a young mother living in an urban slum in Dhaka. A health worker from our partner BRAC knocks on your door for a prenatal checkup. She wants to use your fingerprint to link you to a digital health ID. And then she asks you to read and sign a 10-page privacy notice. You're barely literate. You don't understand complex legal jargon. How would you feel? And what our interviews have shown repeatedly, it's actually feelings of embarrassment and discomfort that make you agree without understanding or even asking any questions. This is not genuinely informed consent. To solve this challenge, we've worked with human rights lawyers from the University of Oxford to design a layered consent approach. It uses incredibly simple wording at the first layer that flows to common, plain language questions at the second layer, and then detailed legal notices at the third layer. And we've tested iterations of this approach with over 250,000 people in 11 different countries, showing that it's consistently GDPR compliant, which is today the strictest privacy standard globally. However, even with a layered consent approach, the reality is that for many low-income individuals, privacy is a foreign concept. For example, if a deworming campaign run by our partners at the Ministry of Health collects demographic information, most villagers feel that's normal. However, when they start getting asked questions around privacy or data sharing or consent, many of them defer the decision to local elders or even get outright scared. In fact, they often feel that, okay, why would you be asking me these questions if something isn't wrong or you're trying to cheat me somehow? To solve this, we propose embedding layered informed consent notices inside customized audio recordings by trusted local leaders, such as health workers or imams or village chieftains. The protocols for these recordings can be customized to allow you to record as many or as few messages as each program needs, completely offline with no need for cellular data. First, this ensures genuine comprehension in local language, even for low literacy populations, even if there's multiple minority or ethnic dialects. Second, it brings local leaders into the process as supporters of informed consent. Even if we solve these first 2 challenges, a final paradox we've seen is that increased awareness about privacy rights can actually enable fraud. So, for example, this graph behind me shows that refusal rates for the same population at different phases of a biometrically verified aid program. And what we actually see is that they've gone way up. But the true consent of the population isn't changing. Instead, corrupt actors have realized that they can hijack the consent process to commit fraud and claim refusals that never actually happened. To solve this, we proposed leveraging the massive expansion of mobile phones to actually verbally record the consent process. And the protocols of our open source toolkit include standards for things like microphone capture and live voice recognition. In summary, by combining a layered privacy approach with detailed customized audio recordings of consent notices and protection against fraud, we think that this open source toolkit can make the human right to privacy available to millions. Thank you very much.
Okay, to keep things moving right along, we have Johannes Ebert presenting.
Hi, my name is Johannes and I'm the CEO of Gravity, a platform that empowers individuals to create digital wallets and manage and control their personal data. And we think a lot about consent. For instance, did you know that whatever content you share on Twitter can be freely reused by them and shared without your permission? You didn't? Well, then your consent probably can't be considered informed. Look at this consent form for refugees. The consent text is a 37-word-long sentence. It's very hard to understand. It says, I can give notice and revoke consent, but it doesn't really tell me how to go about it. And lastly, it's interpreted by a different person every time without any real control on what the actual consumed consent content was. There's a problem with consent, and it disproportionately affects the most vulnerable people. We collect biometrics and so much other sensitive data about individuals. It's time to make a real effort to provide them with agency and oversight. Consent can only be valid if it is informed. So first, we need to better convey who we are, what kind of data we're collecting, and why. Our solution does that by making a phone call to the beneficiary's phone and explaining all this information in a local and jargon-free language. But hearing is not the same as understanding. So before moving on, we ask people if they've understood what was being said, and if not, they can receive further explanations. And lastly, we record a salient affirmative action. I, Johannes, give consent. The second important condition for valid consent is the freedom to say no. And many say that in a humanitarian setting that can't be verified. Because after all, a beneficiary's access to services depends on the data being collected. And that might be true, but if you think about it, almost every consent is conditional. You also don't have any real alternative to Facebook or Twitter for the service social network. What this freedom to say no actually refers to is to have control and oversight over your data not only at the time of collection, but at any moment. So we create a digital consent object that has an expiry date. And this consent object can be stored anywhere. So it could be stored on the default storage of an existing identity system. A hash proof of this object is stored on a public blockchain, which makes it verifiable and tamper-proof, significantly increasing the accountability for everyone involved. And lastly, we remind people to check on their data access permissions by sending them text with clear instructions. Our prototype has an IVR interface to view, renew, and revoke consent, but the solution could also use the existing interfaces and authentication mechanisms of other identity systems. So we wanted to know, how does an improved consent process and more data oversight influence understanding and trust? So we did some user research in Kenya, where we're based. We gathered 2 groups of 20 people each. One was given a paper-based form and the other one was given a prototype of our solution. And we found that both understanding and especially trust were significantly higher in the prototype group. Consent is at the heart of Gravity's protocol that has 5,000 users to date, and we're currently designing the right interfaces for our users. With the Mission Billion prize money, we want to make this toolkit open source, build integrations with popular data collection tools, and an API that can be used by other existing identity systems. In the digital age, consent is not a privilege, but a right. And for this right to become universal, we need to fundamentally rethink how we approach consent. And there's no better platform to drive this change forward than ID4D Mission Billion. Thank you.
Thank you, Johannes. So we're about halfway through the pitches, so that didn't take very long. Be aware, once again, that you will be voting at the end of this on slido.com, so get ready to do that, both those in the room and those that are viewing online. So for the next pitch, I would like to invite John Bruce to pitch his solution.
Thank you, Matthew. And the organizers, thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I'm John Bruce. I'm the CEO of Inrupt, a company I co-founded with Sir Tim Berners-Lee. And I've got 4 short minutes to tell you all about what the company intends to do. Solid is an open source platform that builds unique identities for everyone. And having built those identities, it puts us all totally in control of our digital lives. And the 4 things I want to talk to you about: why did Tim invent Solid? Well, when he invented the web 30 years ago, he said, this is for everyone. But unfortunately, that's not the way it's worked out. It was the 30th anniversary a couple of weeks ago, and while half the world's population is on the web, half of it is not. So Tim invented Solid to write those problems, to get the half that are not, to get them included, and for the half that are plagued by privacy and manipulation issues, to put privacy back in their hands. So let me tell you how Solid works. Solid gives just the way a company has a unique identity on the web, www.whatever.com and so on, we give that to humans. Every human will have a web identity. And they also have a data storage area called a pod. And in that pod, they keep data of their own. They keep government-issued certificates. They can keep information about their lives, information about their family. They can even keep their music and videos if they want. But it's totally under their control. They get to decide who can access data in their pod. And because of the way that web IDs work, it means that the system can integrate with any existing ID system. Actually, for those countries that already have one, Solid can integrate. For those that don't have an ID system, Solid can be the foundation of one. And the way service providers integrate with Solid or interact with Solid through your pod is via a common API. And that API is based on web standards. The whole system is based on existing web standards. And then the data that goes in your pod is yours forever, even after the program that might have expired that originally created the data. So let me tell you how Solid's rolling out around the world. I travel around the world talking to people who want to deploy Solid, and I will tell you that right now we have massive projects underway. There's a country that's looking to deploy Solid to provide better healthcare for their 60 million residents. We have another entity, a pharmaceuticals conglomerate, and they're looking at better ways to deploy drugs to their millions of users. And we're working with a huge telecommunications company that's looking at rolling out to over 300 million users Solid, so that their users, most of whom don't have any financial identity, can begin to build one. But better yet, we've worked with friends at MasterCard, some of them here today, to prove that it actually works. We had a successful pilot for refugees with some major NGOs. And that system proved that we can issue refugees with an identity, and they can travel across multiple service providers using one form of identity, which is in fact a smart card in that case. And they can travel across borders, and they can build a digital identity using their pods. So let me tell you that Solid is real. It's open standards. It's free for everybody to use. And in the words of my partner, Sir Tim, it's for everyone. So thank you for your time.
Okay. The next person to pitch is Natalie Smolensky.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Natalie Smolensky, and thank you. I lead business development for Learning Machine, a software firm that specializes in verifiable digital credentials at population scale. Now, what you're looking at here is a picture of 2 Syrian refugees, literally drying their official records behind them on a beach in Greece. Most institutions today issue credentials in traditional formats, paper and PDF, and this results in massive losses of human capital anytime there is a disruptive event, transfer of population across borders, or even between institutions. Because even if they're able to salvage these documents, they probably won't be able to verify them because the institutions that issued them no longer exist, or the records have been destroyed. So we have a crisis with 5 million displaced people, the most educated refugee population in human history, that have basically had to start over from scratch. The Federation of State Medical Boards in the United States verifies physician credentials, both domestically and internationally. And they're not even sure if they're legally allowed to verify credentials of physicians coming from countries that are labeled state sponsors of terrorism by the United States. So simply calling a Syrian medical school to verify whether that physician is credentialed could be illegal. We don't know. So in order to prevent these types of catastrophes, records need to be several things: digital, portable, private, held by the recipients, and independently verifiable. This is why we developed the BlockCerts open standard for digital credentials with MIT. BlockCerts conform to a principle that we call self-sovereign digital identity. What that means is that individuals now own their data. They're in control of how that data is used. They can share it, access it, view it, and verify it without ongoing dependence on any vendor infrastructure. So we like to say, if you can't fire your vendor, it's not self-sovereign. Recipients have their records in a private wallet. No document data is stored on a blockchain, and documents can be permanently deleted. But perhaps the greatest value of BlockCerts is open verification. We specifically made verification as easy as possible to minimize the costs of adoption. Simply scan a QR code or click a button to verify a credential. And this is an actual verifiable BlockCert. You can see it's an example of a refugee ID card issued by the UNHCR. This is just one example of many types of records that can be issued as a BlockCert. Adoption of BlockCerts is growing worldwide every year. Because it is an open standard, it's impossible to say exactly how many have been issued, but I can tell you that Learning Machine customers alone have issued hundreds and thousands of BlockCerts across 8 different geographies worldwide. These include governments like the Republic of Malta, the Bahamas, multinational institutions like the Caribbean Examinations Council, and higher education vocational training providers all over the world. I want to end with, what we'll do if we're selected as a winner here. There is some prize money allocated, and at Learning Machine, we don't just believe in wins, we believe in win-wins. So if we win, we want you to win too. So we are offering to use this prize money for a free 12-month BlockCerts pilot to an institution anywhere in the world. If you're interested, please come talk with me afterwards. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. We've got one more pitch left, so get your phones ready, slido.com, MBC 2019. It's MBC for Mission Billion Challenge, 2019. It's going to go pretty quickly after Fabro presents. The judges are going to leave the room to deliberate for a few minutes. You're going to speak. I'm sorry, Mr. Mokhtar Diop is going to speak, you're going to vote, and then we're going to announce the winners. So Fabro Steibel, please come pitch.
So, hello everyone, my name is Fabro. And 1 second. Oh, just 1 second. Can I go? Nope. Stands? No. So recapturing the previous 5, yeah. I have to recap the 5. I don't exist. Ah. I've done it before. Okay.
But MIT, we're not used to technical difficulties. There is now thinking.
Reminder for everyone who hasn't yet, in order to get set up to vote for your favorite pitch for the User's Choice Awards, go to Slido, that's SLIDO.com. Is that there?
Yeah.
So, hello everyone. Our solution for the Mission Billion Challenge is called ID-Land. ID-Land is a game. It's a social impact game. It's a game designed for policymaking, making implementations of digital ID systems. The policy we want to solve is to make more actionable with entry-level, middle-level government people who want to implement a system. So it's a game, so I must justify why I'm developing a game to solve the ID problem. You can ask me, I support policy games, but you can also ask Knight Foundation because they have commissioned a report on that. Or ask Game for Change, they've been awarding policy games for the past 9 years. Or you can get the Get Bad News games that we love very much and is addressing the fake news issue and has won the London Design Museum. Maybe the reason why games work is because digital ID, as others, is a wicked problem. Wicked problems are the kind of problems that don't accept a simple solution, a straightforward solution. You change the technology, and then you change the legal framework, you change your privacy, you change the risks, and so on. So different paths for the solution. So with the game, what we want to do is actually make a tree of decision actionable. We are currently working a research with Latin America, Africa, and Asia that will create a decision tree of decisions you have to make if you're implementing a systems. But it's too complex, and the games make it be more actionable. So let me show you how the game works. So just imagine you're in mobile, and then you can click, and there's a card, and you have decisions. This example I'm giving is based on Cristiane. Cristiane is from Brazil, and she lives 10 miles away from me in Rio. And she doesn't have an ID. Well, she has one now, but the past 36 years she didn't. And you can ask slavery in Brazil to know why that is the case. So Cristiane shared a story with us that she went to the hospital and she didn't have an ID. And then she has to make a decision. So enter the shoes of Cristiane. You are a policymaker, enter her shoes. You are at the hospital, you really need help. You don't have ID at all. You know that without ID you have no treatment. Why do you tell the receptionist? You tell the truth, you lie, or you go away. So Cristiane has done the 3 options, and she can tell you what happens. But if you are a policymaker, this has deep consequences on your system. We have stories like Cristiane's in the system, so you can understand from real-based stories what happens. But we also have data based on research. So this is a map of information, a project we did, where we mapped all the ID silos in Brazil. In the top, you see 20 circles. These are the 20 circles of information at the federal government. In the game, I can show you with a card-based decision-making what happens if you make one ID requirement for having another ID. Or what happens if you get married, change your name, and the consequence for updating ID systems in 20 systems that don't combine themselves. They're not interchangeable. So by giving real stories and real case ID, I can make for policymakers quick decisions, actionable decisions for them to understand what's happening. Let's say, for example, that you are in the government and a startup comes to you and want to share information. And they say, look, I want to give you a picture of ID and I want you, the government, to know if this person is a driver or not. In that case, you have to write a contract and name of the government. What do? You accept that you can transfer the data, you accept that you can share the data, or in your opinion, there is no difference between sharing the data or transferring the data. By explaining this in the next slide, I can show you that you can have a Cambridge Analytica systems, or you can try to achieve a GDPR compliant system. So we are lowering the level for policymakers to understand the decisions. We have won awards in the past, and we believe we can design the systems right now is a pilot, but in a few months can be out and ready to use. And I heard about Syria. My grandfather was once a refugee in Syria last century. If he didn't have received an ID, I probably wouldn't be here. And for policymakers who somehow gave him an ID, this is the story of how I can come here and tell my story. So maybe we're not addressing the 1 billion people without the ID, but we're addressing the needs of these millions who are policymakers and want to deliver change. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Fabro, and thank you, everyone, for your patience, especially Fabro, right before your pitch. Okay, so I'm going to release the judges. The judges are going to go and deliberate quickly and select the winners of, there's going to be a couple of winners, I believe that's the plan, for the Mission Billion Challenge and the winners of the prize money. While they're doing that, everyone pull out your phones, get on your web browser, slido.com, and you'll enter the code MBC2019 to vote for your favorite. I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that. Everyone should be inputting their favorites, and that will be for the People's Choice Award, which we're going to announce in a moment as well. And while you are all doing that, I'd like to invite Mr.
Concentrate on That would be the right choice.
So they make the right choice. Got it. It's a very quick thing, so most people should have done it by now. It's a very quick thing. We feel good. We've made our decisions.
Part of generation.
Some folks need a little bit more time. That's okay. Can I get some thumbs up if we've all done it? We've got thumbs up. Yeah? Okay, great. So with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Mokhtar Diop, who's the Vice President of Infrastructure here at the World Bank.
Thank you. I think the first game you need to give to us who are parents is can we act half as fast as our children on this type of things, as my challenge all the time. So my son used to say, you know, when I send a text to you, I say email, he said, what are you talking about? He said text. So say, when I'm writing a text to you, Dad, it's ta-ta-ta-ta. When you're writing a text to me, is So I think that generational gap was showing in the speed of the vote that we had today. Not everybody is a millennial. No, but thank you very much. It's for me very exciting, and thank you very much to Vijayanti and the colleagues for organizing this. It's the way we should be doing. And one of the suggestions I will make, if I have the Minister of Rwanda here, if it's not already planned in the next meeting that you will have in Kigali, Transforming Africa, it would be great to have a session like this to show to policymakers what really is happening and what has applications. So if your blessing, will be delighted to speak in the name of my colleagues to organize a session like this with people from abroad, but also from African startup, and to show to our policymakers that a lot of things are happening in our continent. So let me thank all colleagues, the Minister from Côte d'Ivoire as well, and other members who are here today. For us, you know, this is partnership with universities, with startup is essential in this space. If we don't do that, we will be totally out of this space. We consider that supporting and creating that ecosystem is essential. I think what is happening in Rwanda has been spoken about, but also is happening in other countries. I was had the opportunity to visit Yamoussoukro in Côte d'Ivoire, where they have a school of engineering, where there is now a collaboration with the private sector to train people in big data. So things are happening in the continent, and what we want to do is to do more of that, so that people can do much more work on big data and statistics, but also to be able to put it in our own programs. This is data privacy, data is regulation will be central to whatever happens in the future. I have our director from DEC here, from data, Eshan, who is here, with really help us, the institution, in defining our policy in terms of data that we are holding and the collection of data. This is a very important point, and we'll be able. The second point that will be happening with what we call the moonshot that was discussed this morning is all this issue of cybersecurity, and we should not take it lightly. Butena, who is leading the digital development team, is making it part of our priorities, and I'm insisting on it. I know that already with the increased access of services in the digital space, some countries in Africa are facing serious attacks, cyber attacks. It's not something that is happening in the future, it's happening today. So, sometimes they have to shut down the systems to be able to stop some of the attacks. So we have to be very careful on this issue of security, but also on privacy on one hand. So the digital ID is for us something which we are extremely proud of, because that's basically the key for everything. If you don't have an ID, you cannot get in a lot of places in the real world. But if you don't have a digital ID, you will not be able to enter a lot of places in this century. So we need to move on this agenda. Is the impact on poverty, on distributional income differences in country is essential, and we need really to work, continue working in that space. An offer here for foundations we are partnering with and country. We would like to create a very dynamic type of relationship and bring more and more young people who could spend a couple of months, 2 or 3 months working for our teams. I didn't clear it with Butena's team, but I think that I'm speaking on their behalf to see how we could build this relation with all the partners here, particularly foundations and academic institutions, to be able to give us the latest of what is happening in the space, so that we can use that also to share it for our client worldwide. So as we go, I will be very interested in building that partnership, but also to be the partnership between African institutions in particular and institutions overseas. Some countries are bringing already institutions in their own countries, but I think we need to work on that space to make sure that the job of the fourth revolution, industrial revolution, are not only located in it. And I will just stop by saying that beyond ID, when we're talking about digitalization in Africa in particular, we want to make sure that African countries will be working on two tracks. One is to the job of today, which are labor intensive, but also to be ready for the job of tomorrow, because the transition might be very fast, might be non-linear, and the country needs to be ready to face that. So all the work we are doing now on digital ID is and ID for development is just to pile something on the stack and make sure that the stack is not falling, but growing as fast as possible. So now I understand that the jury is out, as they say, and I don't know.
So that has the results inside.
Two results.
Yes.
So I never know how to do this. The winner is, that's what the line is.
From the top down.
So let me be very specific and verbatim what it is here. The trick is I don't like result. You say I don't have my glasses. So I'm not going to do that. And yes, someone else announce it for you. But I will not use that trick. So before we announce the winners based on all of your votes, here in the room and online, the People's Choice Award goes to Simprints.
So Matt, will you hand him the award and just shake his hand and we'll take a photo?
So you are the winner of the popular vote.
Popular vote.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
In third place, we have a tie. The winners are Block Cert and Stan.
Congratulations. Thank you.
photo together. Great.
For the second place, the winning solution is solid. And for the collegial vote and the popular vote are the same. It's Simprints. Thank you so much. So thank you very much for attending. I think now I believe in the hands of.
Yes, the end.
At the end, the prize has been given, and but this of working together. So think about it. Those in academia here or in foundations, if you have young people who are very, wants to help, maybe you can work out a kind of internship program with a bank and bring them here to work with us on solutions. And for academia, MIT, to encourage you to continue working with African universities.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much.